All right, you're joining us again for Going Deeper. If you've already listened to or watched the service, I hope this helps you explore some of the things that, just doing a sermon doesn't allow you to. You get to sit there and think about things, and maybe you make comments to a few people next to you or afterwards, but this is designed to intentionally discuss the things that were highlighted in the service, in the sermon, and those things that could not be included. So that's what we're going to do today. So we are continuing the series on the Sermon on the Mount, looking at the fact that Jesus is describing the kingdom of God, and it's upside down from what we experience on earth and the way that the secular world sets things up. And so that's what we're looking at and addressing. And so our passage today is going to be Matthew 7. So we've gone through 5 and 6, and we reviewed all of that last week. And now we're jumping into chapter 7, and so we're going to read through the first 6 verses and ask the questions like we have been doing. What do I see? What words or phrases stand out? What does it mean? Why is it included in the Bible? How does it work for me? And how does it work for others? So let's dive right into Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is sacred. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. All right, so now that we've read through that, I'm going to invite you to ask and dialogue about those questions on what do we see in this text. Okay, so hopefully had some good thoughts there on what do you see in the text. It's interesting. There's examples of dogs. There's examples of pigs. When he's talking in relationship to those who might think that they're very pious and religious. And pigs and dogs were terms for those that were unclean, those that were the Gentiles. So he's making some connections and comparisons there. So that's one of the things that stands out. I'm not going to go into much more detail on it, but just wanted to bring that up. What does it mean? That's what we're going to spend some time looking at, and how does it work for me? So maybe you've already had some of those discussions, but we're going to unpack that a little more, and I'm going to show you the slides that we've done at the end, and we haven't really spent some time doing. So is there an example for me to follow? Well, that's what Jesus is doing here. He's laying out an example for us to follow. And is there a sin to avoid? So he gives the example of what we do and the example of what we should do. So there's both of those there. So the don't judge would be an example to follow, and the sin to avoid would be judging. Is there a promise to claim? No, not in this case. Is there a prayer to repeat? No. Is there a command to obey? Well, this essentially is a command to not judge. Is there conditions to be met? No. Is there a verse to memorize? Maybe. We'll come back to that. Is there an error to mark? I think there definitely is, and we'll dive into that as we get a little further. Is there a challenge to face? I think this is challenging because as we look around the world today, no doubt we see this very thing taking place. So a little bit of discussion time here. For what things have you been judged? What things are you most likely to judge someone else? Why is judging others so easy? And what are things you can do to prevent it from happening, either to you or to someone else, or from you doing it? And what are some ways this is happening in our world? So I'll give you a moment to discuss that. So you can just pause right here. Okay, so for what things have you been judged? Well, there's probably a lot of things that I could think of. Been judged based on appearance, been judged based on something I may have said or missaid, judged based on where I was from. I'm sure you faced some of those very things. What are things we are likely to judge others for? Well, I'll go in a different direction here than maybe you do, but having been trained in seminary, it was really difficult initially after coming out of seminary to sit and listen to any person, whether it was a pastor or a lay person, preach and not think about, well, I wouldn't have said it that way, or you missed this and didn't include that. But every time a person is doing a sermon or teaching, there's always things that aren't included. So it's not always a matter of they forgot something, they left something out. Well, they did. They made a choice to most of the time. So that's one of the areas where it took some time to be able to not do that and just enjoy and take in whatever the person was presenting, because that's where God led them to prepare and do things. Why is it so easy? All right, so why is it so easy to judge others? Well, I think judging others makes us feel better about ourselves, because we didn't fall into whatever they fell into, or it makes us feel more pious, more righteous, because look, I'm better than them. So I think that's one of the reasons. Is it's easy way to try to elevate ourselves. It's why kids sometimes name call. It's putting someone else down makes them lower than you, and then because they're lower than you, now you've been elevated. And in reality, it doesn't elevate anybody. But I think that's one of the reasons it's easy to do that. The other thing is, societal pressure at times, or just group pressure can cause that, and I'll get into that as we get further down here. What are things you can do to prevent it? That's a good question. I think one way is speak up when you hear it. Say, are you being judgmental there? That might be something you can do, or challenging people on that. To totally prevent it, I have no idea how to do that. What are some ways this is happening in the world today? I'll come back to that question. I want to jump back to the original context and show you a few other things here. I'll put it on the screen for a moment. You can pause if you want to. I'll go to another screen which will have more info in just a second. Okay, so that was a chart that was made up, and then this is the full list. So one of the things that happened in ancient times was trying to make oneself as righteous as possible by following the law. I'm trying to look up the numbers here. I don't have them off the top of my head. There were, I don't have it on this page. There it is. 613 commandments that were given in the Torah, or the Mosaic Law. So the first 5 books of the Bible. We know the 10 Commandments. We probably don't have the 613 memorized. Well, the Mishnah, or the Midrash, is writing. The Midrash is within the Mishnah. You don't need to know that, which included thousands of other rules and regulations, and it's either called the Melachos, which is what it was here, or the Melachot. Endings change in Hebrew, so don't worry about that. Either you hear any of those, they're all kind of referring to the same thing. So this is the 39 different areas in which new rules, new regulations, the traditions. So when the scriptures say you follow the traditions, this is what it's referring to, is these 39 areas. So the rabbis figured out that you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. So what's work? Is, going, where is it? It was in here. I want to go back to it a second, because I want to get it right. Okay, so writing. Is writing or erasing work? Anybody who has written anything, you know writing can be an effort. Now, we have typewriters and we have ways to make it easy, but you have to think about the work of getting a scroll or manufacturing papyrus or any of those kinds of things and having those, and the work and effort to get ink. So there's more into it. But they made a decision that writing was work, but how much writing is work? When is it not work? When is it work? Well, writing one letter, not work. Writing 2 letters, that's work. Erasing 1 letter, not work. Erasing 2 letters, that's work. So you couldn't write, or you couldn't correct something in writing more than 1 letter. Now remember, scribes were writing things by hands and all this, so that took that off the table. They couldn't do that on the Sabbath, so that was off the table. You couldn't work on those things or do things. So they would find out, how far can we walk? Is 1 hour of walking work? Is a half an hour of walking work? And I don't remember exactly where all that was, but they had those kinds of things. So all kinds of things that they determined. So this is the chart they came up with, the different categories. You see the green there. Those things have to do with farming related stuff. The blue and purple there in the middle, those would have to do with the sheep, and then what do you do with the wool and that kind of stuff, making thread, quilting, sewing. And then the bottom there, the tan, would be, hunting and things related with that, the animal hides and meat. The pink up there in the corner is making a fire or putting a fire out. Then below that was the writing. After that, there's carrying. I'm trying to move it because I have it on a screen behind me that's larger. Striking the final blow, and then building or demolishing is the orange on the bottom there. So you can see that's why they put it in this periodic chart, so to speak, because they have different related categories, and so. But overall, there was 39 different things that were related to that they came up with that said you can't do this because we need another rule for it. And then, somebody would ask a question. Well, is this included? Yes, you could not throw a toothpick into a fire because that was causing the fire to go up. So that would be something you couldn't do. So these were traditions, and they kept building and kept building and kept building and adding and clarifying and clarifying. And this was how the Pharisees judged themselves and each other, was on their ability to keep all of these. It's also why when they ask Jesus, which is the greatest commandment, they're thinking of all of these. And he says, love God and love others. That doesn't have anything to do with these things. These are just regulations for the sake of regulations, and people following them for the sake of being able to claim themselves more righteous than someone else. So it's a whole system that they have. So enough about that, and I wanted to get into, that's really silly and ridiculous. Do we ever do that? Well, maybe you're familiar with the Amish, or maybe you grew up in certain households that might do this too. Shunning. Shunning is a thing that is practiced in the Amish culture. It doesn't just come from the Amish. It's been in other cultures. But I'm talking to the degree that they do it, where someone is shunned from the community. That means parents can't communicate with, talk to, or visit with. Other people in the community will not. If you associate with the person who's been shunned, then you also get shunned because your association with that person. But it doesn't just happen there. This can happen in families. I know people that grew up in German households. This is the thing. Amish come from German ancestry. People who grew up in Dutch households, they've shared the same thing. People in the Far East, Japanese, Chinese. Sometimes there's a whole culture of honor, and then shame that goes with it. It's a little bit different than shunning, but all of that takes place within that, where we judge someone else and their ability to be in the community or outside of the community. And one of the things we do is we shun them. Now, more recently, that's a widespread thing that happens. It can happen within a family. It can happen within a whole community, a business, a church, a school. Did you hear about what so-and-so said? Don't do anything. Don't have anything to do with them. So maybe you've experienced that before. When I finish going through these three, maybe I'll give you a chance to talk about that. Political correctness, that's a more modern thing, and maybe it came about in the 80s, 90s, not sure where, maybe it started before that, but the term really took off in the 90s, where you had to begin to watch what you say and how you said it, because if you said certain words or certain things, that was not correct. You can't do that. That's going to be equated with being hateful or disrespectful or other things, and it's not the intent that's judged, it's what you say that becomes judged, or in print or published and all those kinds of things. So so that became a thing that happened, and people are judged based on it, and it's a way to say, well, look, I am better than you because I'm politically correct, and you heathen, you're not. You don't respect the norms that we are now establishing and be, lifting ourselves up with, because we're better than old society, because now we're enlightened and we're above that all. And, well, you're still of the old way, and you're not. So we've created a way of hierarchy of doing that, and now that's progressed even to a new stage of this cancel culture. And maybe you're not familiar with it, or maybe you haven't heard that term. I've heard it a few times. It's becoming more used, but that's kind of what happened to, trying to think of the cooking lady, Paula Deen. Something she said or may have said years ago got her show canceled. It's other people who, were in blackface in college 20-some years ago. Now, that's an outrageous thing to do. The fact that you, in your past, made a judgment to do something that now today doesn't meet our standards means we disassociate with you, and we strive to get anything you do canceled and get you off the air. Now, this happens with celebrities and others, people who have television shows, but this also can happen with people in school and the way people treat you. This can happen in businesses. So it's not exclusive to that. I'm just giving you examples that maybe you've seen or heard about or followed. And I think this is all really around judging each other. And even some other things to where people will say, you have to denounce things. And the fact that you don't denounce things means that you approve of things. And I don't think those two things equate. I think one of the things is rushing to judgment. To denounce something is judging. And if you don't have all the facts, sometimes you find out later on that you were denouncing something with all the other information, and had you more information, you would not have done that. So we're in this whole vibe right now, which we have ours, but this is similar to that denouncing of people that took place in the first century that Jesus is talking about. So, okay, I'll come back to that. So, if you want to pause here and maybe have a discussion about any times you've experienced shunning, or just what you've seen with political correctness, or cancel culture. Have you experienced it? Have you seen others, or what has that meant in your circle of friends and family and work and coworkers, I'll just give you a chance to discuss that if you want to right here. All right. Okay, so gonna move on to just what do we do with this? Well, we break this command, I think, when we think the worst of others. When that's the first thing we rush to, we think the worst. We do this when we only speak of others as their faults. Oh, well, I'll give you a biblical example. The Rahab the harlot, or the woman at the well. What do we know about her? She had 5 husbands, and the one she was with, wasn't her husband. Or the woman caught in adultery. Funny, that's the thing we know about them, and that we're speaking of others of their faults. That also goes in the second one, judging someone's entire life by their worst moments. Now, those 3 women also do have good moments, so we're doing it, but we do call them by their faults, so to speak. We judge the hidden motives of others without asking, without a conversation, without exploring. And why did you do that? That's what we do as parents when kids do something. Why did you do that? We often don't do that. We rush to judge people based on what they did or what they said without knowing their motives or their intent or what they really intended to do or intended to say that they did a poor job of. We judge others without considering ourselves in the same circumstances. I think that's one thing that sometimes we do when we want to claim things are sin and someone did it, is we don't judge their circumstances to understand how this came about. So I think we do that. Judging others without being mindful that we ourselves will be judged. I think we do that too. Now, one thing to say, this is not to say we don't ever have the right to judge someone. Scripture tells us in different places about where and how we need to tell people the truth, and we need to speak the truth in love, where we're called to go to someone who has a problem and bring 2 or 3 witnesses and those types of things. So there are certainly cases where Scripture expects us to engage someone around their behavior and things that they do. So the world's idea that Scripture says, says don't judge, so you can't ever judge me, or it says he who's without sin cast the first stone. Yes, those are true things. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. He's getting at the fact that the person who is judging someone else is doing so not with the intent to correct or help someone, but with the intent to elevate themselves and put down someone else. And that's what Jesus is saying we should not do. We don't judge someone else. It's hypocritical to do that. And that's what he says, you hypocrites, don't do that. Okay. I guess that's kind of the end of what I had. I know I didn't get into the last phrase there. I talked a little bit at the beginning about the swine and the dogs, and that's where Jesus is taking this teaching about judging others, which would be inside the group. We're all in the group, and I'm elevating those in the group who are better or worse. Myself, elevate. Those who are worse, decrease. But when we go outside our community, there's also, we don't put our things out there that others are going to make fun of and trample and turn against us. And unfortunately, I think we do that a lot. We publicly judge people's sins in the public arena, and then society gets to jump on the bandwagon too. So I think there's some connection there. But I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a blessed week.